What's up everyone, Alex aka Soldier First Class here, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different than what I normally do, and that is we're going to talk about the Soulsborne series. Now I want to give a little bit of a background on my history with the series. I was not a Soulsborne player. People online, my friends, they can all tell you, I hated these games. I thought that they were just pointless difficulty for the sake of being difficulty. I'm sure some people watching this video will have heard me say that, or even saw me on Twitter say that. Like, that is the gist of how I felt about these games. Fast forward to now, and I've now played every single Soulsborne game and platinumed Bloodborne, and I have to say that it changed my mind. I completely understand now why people love these games and what they mean to everybody. And, you know, I always see these videos online like, oh, Dark Souls saved my life, or the Soulsborne series changed my life, or did this, or did that. And I never quite understood that feeling. I never quite understood it. And even one of my favorite YouTubers, Nakey Jakey, has a video about how Dark Souls saved his life. And I never, even after watching that, never understood for myself what it meant. And now that I've played all of the Soulsborne series and beaten all of them and taken on the hardest bosses, I now get it. Because the Soulsborne series changed my life too. And I want to say that the Soulsborne series is part of the reason why I'm back with you now for however long that is. Because if it weren't for playing these games, if it weren't for overcoming the struggle that I overcame by playing them, I don't think I would have learned a lesson that I needed to learn to come back. And I want to dive into that a little bit, but I also want to just thank fromsoftware for starting this series, for making these games what they are, and sticking true to their formula. Because despite how you may feel about Elden Ring, or any other game in the series, including Dark Souls 2, these games have a way of changing people. Whether you're good at them, whether you're bad at them, whether you're hilariously bad at them, it feels like there is something important to be said about these games, and I want to say it today. But a little history on my Soulsborne playing. Several years ago, my roommate at the time bought Dark Souls 3, and he couldn't get past this part, and he's like, hey, maybe you should try it. And I couldn't get past it either, and I fucking hated it. I was like, this is ridiculous. Why is this even fun to people? And even a few years ago, I was like, man, Bloodborne is so fucking jank. I don't know how anybody can like this game. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, I talk so much shit about Soulsborne, it's not even funny. And like I said, people that are online could probably tell you that I didn't like this series. But then something weird and kind of magical happened. Elden Ring started getting some coverage on the internet, and it hadn't launched yet, and for some reason I felt this fear of missing out, FOMO as we'll call it, and I don't know why, because I knew I didn't like these games. I knew for a fact that buying Elden Ring was not going to change my mind, but I got fear of missing out really bad, and decided like, oh, I'm going to buy Elden Ring when it comes out. So I bought Elden Ring when it came out on PC. And needless to say, I'm 5 playthroughs deep. I've made several builds. I've completed the game multiple times, whether it's a regular playthrough, New Game Plus. I've beaten Millennia. I've beaten all the hardest bosses in Elden Ring. And I absolutely love it. It's now one of my favorite games of all time. Which is crazy, because even a year ago, before the game came out, I would not have said that. Ever. And I never would have thought that was possible. And I'm sure a lot of people that know me would have never thought that was possible. Even my wife was like, I can't believe you like Elden Ring. I think what's crazy about it really is that it inspired me to play the rest of the series. And I played them in kind of a weird order. So I went from Elden Ring to Sekiro, which it's funny because I actually bought Sekiro when it launched because I had the same fear of missing out. And I ended up hating it because I didn't understand it. And now I absolutely love that game. It's another really great game. And it's funny because I actually tried to get my money back on it on PlayStation on the store. And after Sony basically told me to eat their nuts, I was like, well, shit, I guess I'm just out $60. Whatever, I'll just move on to the next game. I don't remember what game came out around the same time that I was playing, but regardless, I didn't like Sekiro at the time. Then I decided to play Dark Souls 3 because I'd heard it was the best of the Dark Souls games, and so I decided to play it. And I got to play it in a unique perspective because I know a lot of people played Dark Souls 1 first, and so the connections and the lore and everything else that you get into in Dark Souls 1 that appear in Dark Souls 3, such as Nameless King, Firelink Shrine, stuff like that all connected. And I saw it from kind of a weird but also cool perspective because for me, I was playing them in reverse order. So I'd played Elden Ring, then Sekiro, then Dark Souls 3, then Dark Souls 1. So I saw Anor Londo in a different light. I saw Firelink Shrine in a different light. I saw Soul of Cinder and Gwyn. I saw those in different ways, but it's funny because, like I said, I've seen all of these YouTubers, like Nakey Jakey, say, oh, this game changed my life, and I never really understood it, and now I finally do. I do have depression. I went to a doctor a couple years ago and was diagnosed clinically with it, and I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't know. I felt broken. I felt wrong. I felt like I was going to be judged for it. I felt like it's hard to talk about online because, anytime people talk about having depression, everybody's like, oh, everybody has depression. Everybody deals with it. Everybody, blah, and they try to downplay it or they try to make you feel lesser for how you feel or whatever. And so I just didn't talk about it. I entered the worst of it in my life and walked away from this. And after a year of walking away from this was when I started playing Elden Ring. And it changed me. And I started looking up lore videos and videos about people playing Dark Souls and people's experience with Elden Ring and how it changed their lives and how Miyazaki goes about his design philosophy with the Soulsborne series. And then I started watching Berserk again. And I realized that Guts represents the people that continue to struggle and fight these battles that aren't always visible. He's haunted by his demons. He's haunted by his best friend. He's trying to protect the ones he loves, all while struggling internally and externally. And for me, Berserk really hit home on those messages. Kentaro Miura is a genius, in my opinion, for that. I also think that Hidetaka Miyazaki is a genius for his design philosophy. Because struggle is all a part of life. It's a part of who we are as a human race. It's a part of everything. And to incorporate that into a video game and have it open your eyes to a whole new world of what video games can mean to you is something that can't be understated. And it's one of those things where I didn't understand it until now. From the time that you enter Firelink Shrine for the first time, and you see the man sitting there, and he tells you a little bit about the world. And then you go out and explore, and if you're like me, and like a lot of people, you head towards the graveyard, and you get your shit absolutely wrecked by some skeletons that are super overpowered for where you're at in the game. But then you move on, and you go towards the first destination, Undead Burg. And you realize that, yes, it's still a struggle, but you can overcome it. And then you hit the first couple bosses. And then you realize that all of the map is interconnected, at least in the first half, to Firelink Shrine. And that all paths lead home. Or at least the home you have for the game. And you go through and you play these bosses and you realize that they are so deeply connected to the world that not only are you overcoming bosses, you're overcoming the world that you've found yourself in. So I actually realized while editing this video that I didn't talk about the actual difficulty of these games and how it's actually shifted my focus on difficulty in other video games. When Jedi Survivor came out, I actually played it on Grandmaster difficulty because I had been playing Soulsborne games, and I wanted that challenge, and since Jedi Survivor is a Souls-like, I felt the need to play it on the hardest difficulty, and completed it. So, Dark Souls, Soulsborne series has changed how I look at video games and how I look at difficulty in those games, because I remember specifically that basically up until I was like 25 or 26, I was basically just playing games and beating my head against a wall until I beat them, instead of actually like figuring out the inner machinations of the game. So I also have to thank Dark Souls for how I look at mechanics, boss fights, how I judge boss fights, how I judge difficulty, how I pretty much play video games now. I think one of the big reasons, besides just the messages these games have given me that I love them, is they have some of the best boss design I've ever seen. Like, you can look at Dark Souls bosses and tell that they're Dark Souls bosses. Like, and the lore that are attached to these bosses, like Gwyn being the first person to light the flame, and then you go in and you fight Gwyn, and he has this piano theme that you can't get out of your head as you're fighting him. And it's like this odd, it's this eerily calming song for what should be a final boss. And you just sit there and listen to it as you're playing, and the music almost tells as much of a story as everything else. And typically you find that music tells that story in RPG games with story-heavy themes. But Dark Souls doesn't really have that, and it still tells a story. And so it's amazing to me because there's a story, or rather how the song was composed for Gwyn, that's really interesting. Because Gwyn, as a character, is afraid of the darkness inside humanity. Afraid of the Dark Soul. And his theme is composed without using any of the black keys on a piano. And so that type of storytelling is so cool to me, because that's an interesting little snip of whatever facts you want to call it. Like, the boss design of Nameless King, who for 3 games, technically 2, we've heard about the nameless son of Gwyn. And in Dark Souls 3, you finally get to fight him. And his boss fight is so epic, and the music is so epic. And you never learn his name. But it doesn't matter. Because for those games, you are now facing the son of Gwyn. Soul of Cinder is a combination of all of the people that have ever lit the flame and gotten through that struggle over the years. It changes form to be whatever build it wants to be, to emulate the people that lit the flame before it. And it has a remix of Gwyn's theme. And I think there's something very beautiful about how that is. And so, the quality of these games is immense. It's huge. So, I feel like a lot of care and a lot of love has gone into crafting the tale of Dark Souls and the Soulsborne series in general. And we haven't even discussed the most important boss, or who I think is the most important boss of Dark Souls, and that's Artorias, who is the subject of this thumbnail. who is partially the subject of this video. Artorias had a struggle to destroy Manus. And according to legends, Artorias succeeded. But when you go into the DLC, you realize that the legends aren't true. And that Artorias did not overcome his struggle. And he succumbed to the abyss. And as you go back in the DLC and you fight Artorias, not only are you fighting Artorias, you're kind of fighting yourself. You're fighting against the abyss. Then you go and fight Manus, and you're fighting the physical manifestation of the abyss. Once you overcome it, if you've saved Sif in the past, and you go and fight Sif for real in Dark Souls, he recognizes you. And I think what the story that tells is so important, because Artorias can finally be laid to rest, as are the demons that he fought against. As will Sif, when we defeat him. They can die a warrior's death and be laid to rest. And I think those messages are very powerful coming from this game. And it's so crazy to me because I did not understand this until playing them for myself. And I cannot recommend these games anymore. Like, I highly recommend these games. And I feel like the overcoming of struggle that I felt in Elden Ring, and the vastness of the game, and how around every corner there's something to find, and every cave there's something to unlock, and every boss there's something to learn from. You know, no two bosses are the same unless they're, you know, repeated. But like when you get to Margit, it feels like the whole game just opens up, right? You don't even have to go to Stormvale Castle. You can take a path around it and go to Liurnia. I mean, the amount of things you can do in the game is incredible. And I never understood it. Never understood the appeal. And now I feel foolish, because now I get it. So I just, Dark Souls, and by proxy Elden Ring, changed my life for the better. It allowed me to overcome my struggles. It allowed me to understand that even though I may fail now, I can succeed later. Life is all about a mixture of failures and successes. And you have the ability to fight and overcome some of these struggles. I'm not saying all. But these games have taught me that there is a reason we fight. There's a reason we battle our demons. And there's a reason why we overcome them. And I think even if you don't play these games, this message is pretty clear. No matter how you're feeling, no matter what you're going through, don't give up. Because you never know. You never know what the future might hold if you give up. I cannot stress enough how much these games actually did change my life. And so, I don't think these games are for everyone. No game is. But I think the lesson to be learned here is that struggle is a part of life. Nothing is easy. But it's what you make of it that matters. Not everybody is cut out to be a movie star. Not everybody's cut out to be a YouTuber or a Twitch streamer or whatever. But you can have fun with the time that you have, the people you meet, the friends you make, the family you gain. And Dark Souls, Soulsborne taught me that. That I just have to overcome my struggles, or at least keep them at bay, to make my life better. And my life has gotten better. So, before I shed a tear on video, I'm going to wrap this one up. I've taken up enough of your time. I can't recommend these games enough. But, again, not for everyone. I'm not even going to ask you to like and subscribe to this video, because honestly, if you like the content, you will anyway. Shouldn't have to beg you. And I'm not going to anymore. Thank you all for watching. I love you all very much. And don't you dare go hollow. Bye, guys.